Pause for a moment, because if you have been sensing that something is about to shift, you may want to pay attention to every word that comes next. Imagine hearing a knock on your door at a time when you least expect it. You open the door, and standing there is the person who has been living in a quiet, hidden place within your heart. They are not there simply to have a casual talk. They have come because there is something inside them that they can no longer keep buried. There are words they have practiced silently in their mind. There is a truth they have tried to avoid. There is a choice they have struggled to make. And now, they may finally be ready to place all of it in front of you. It may explain why they came, why they selected this particular moment, and what their behavior is showing while they stand there facing you. Perhaps the distance between you was never truly the ending you thought it was. Perhaps the silence was covering a much deeper emotional battle. So listen carefully. Do not hurry through this. Do not decide in advance that you already understand what the message will be. Because sometimes one unexpected conversation has the power to completely change the way you see an entire connection. And the truth that may be waiting on the other side of your door could be something you never expected to hear. The idea of your soulmate coming toward your home carries a meaning that reaches much further than simply picturing someone standing outside your door. A home is one of the strongest symbols of the inner self. It represents the place where you are most authentic, where you do not need to perform for anyone, pretend to be someone else, or hide behind the expectations of society. So when someone who carries emotional importance begins moving toward your home, symbolically, it can point towards something much deeper. It can represent movement toward emotional closeness, emotional honesty, and a willingness to enter a part of your world that is more private and real. Maybe the conversations between you became shorter. Maybe feelings remained unspoken, or circumstances created a separation that neither of you completely understood. You may have spent time wondering whether the connection was slowly disappearing, or whether the other person had simply moved forward with their life. Yet emotional connections do not always disappear just because communication stops. Feelings can continue developing quietly beneath everything that appears on the surface. What looks like silence from the outside may actually be a period of inner conflict, reflection, and emotional processing. There is nowhere to hide behind a screen, an excuse, or a carefully created image. Their physical presence becomes a message by itself. It can represent a desire to finally face something that has remained unresolved for a long time. This is why the idea of their journey toward your home can be understood as an emotional return. They may not necessarily be returning because everything has suddenly become perfect. They may be returning because something inside them has changed enough that continuing to avoid the truth has become uncomfortable. And this is where your own transformation becomes important. You may have spent a long time asking yourself when they would return, what they were thinking, or whether they still cared about you. But while you were waiting, you may have changed in ways you did not even notice. You may have learned to stand more strongly in your own identity. You may no longer need their attention to prove your value. You may have discovered that love cannot be forced, chased, controlled, or demanded. Real emotional maturity begins when you can care deeply about someone without losing yourself in the process. That is why their arrival, if it happens, should not be seen only as proof that destiny has finally given you what you wanted. What matters is not simply that they return. What matters is why they return and what they are prepared to bring with them. Are they bringing honesty? Are they bringing accountability? Are they ready to communicate openly? Are their actions matching the words they speak? These questions matter because returning is one thing, while returning with genuine growth is something completely different. The doorway becomes deeply symbolic here. A doorway separates one space from another, just as emotional honesty can separate an old pattern from a new possibility. But remember something essential. You do not have to rush to interpret their arrival. Listen first, observe, allow the moment to speak for itself. Someone standing at your door can represent a person standing at the edge of their own fear. They may have reached the point where avoiding what they feel has become harder than facing it. Observe calmly. Let their actions unfold naturally. Sometimes the strongest response is not an immediate emotional reaction, but quiet awareness. You can allow the moment to reveal itself without forcing it into the story you have already created in your mind. Because perhaps the deepest meaning of their journey toward your home is not simply that they are coming back to you. Perhaps it is that they are finally coming face to face with a truth they have been carrying inside themselves for a very long time. And when two people meet in a place where their usual masks begin to fall away, even an ordinary conversation can become the beginning of a completely different chapter. There are moments when a person carries something inside for so long that remaining silent becomes heavier than finally speaking. They may continue living their normal daily life. They may appear peaceful on the outside. They may even convince themselves that keeping certain feelings hidden is easier and safer. But emotions that remain unexpressed do not simply vanish. They often move beneath the surface, affecting decisions, creating inner pressure, and returning again and again during unexpected moments. This is why the idea of your soulmate arriving with important news can represent much more than a simple announcement. It can symbolize the moment when something hidden finally searches for a way to be expressed. Maybe they were afraid of rejection. Maybe they were afraid that changing the relationship would create consequences they were not prepared for. Or perhaps they were afraid that admitting their feelings would make them too vulnerable. People often protect themselves by choosing silence. They tell themselves they are being practical, realistic, careful, or responsible. But beneath those explanations, there can sometimes be fear. Fear of losing control, fear of being misunderstood, fear of being rejected, fear of discovering that the emotions they tried to suppress are much stronger than they expected. And sometimes the hidden truth is not necessarily a direct declaration of love. They may finally explain why they pulled away. They may tell you why they became distant. They may explain why their behavior seemed confusing or contradictory. What you experienced as uncertainty may have been connected to an internal conflict they were unable to communicate. This is why you should listen carefully if such a conversation ever takes place. Do not listen only for the words you have been hoping to hear. Listen for the meaning underneath those words. Watch whether their statements are supported by responsibility and genuine intention. Someone can speak beautiful words while still refusing to change anything. Another person may struggle to express themselves perfectly, yet their actions may show sincerity in a much stronger way. Pay attention to whether their words are supported by responsibility, consistency, and real effort. There is also something powerful about receiving information directly instead of trying to discover the truth through assumptions. When we care deeply about someone, the mind can create countless explanations for their silence. One day, we may believe they are afraid. Another day, we may believe they have forgotten us. We can interpret small signs, memories, dreams, and coincidences according to whatever emotional state we happen to be experiencing. But direct communication can break through some of that uncertainty. It gives reality the opportunity to replace imagination. If this person comes forward with something important, allow them to speak. Do not immediately finish their sentences for them. Do not rush to tell them what you think they are trying to say. Let them find their own words. Their hesitation may show you that the conversation is difficult for them. Their vulnerability may reveal that the subject carries real emotional weight. Their willingness to finally address something that has remained hidden may itself be evidence that something has changed within them. At the same time, protect your own emotional balance. You do not have to accept every explanation simply because you have been waiting for an explanation. You can listen to someone with compassion while still using discernment. You can appreciate their honesty without immediately promising them your future. You can understand their pain without taking responsibility for healing everything they have not healed themselves. Perhaps the most meaningful news they bring is that they have finally become willing to stop running from something inside themselves. They may have realized that avoiding the truth did not make the truth disappear. They may have discovered that distance did not erase the emotional connection. Silence did not answer the questions inside them. Time did not automatically remove everything they hoped it would remove. So if that moment arrives, listen with an open heart, but also with a clear mind. Do not listen only for confirmation of what you already hope is true. Listen for truth. Listen for responsibility. Listen for emotional courage. Listen for evidence that the person speaking to you understands the effect of their choices. Because sometimes the message someone brings to your door is not simply about what they want from you. It is about what they have finally become brave enough to admit to themselves. And when hidden feelings finally enter the light, the conversation that follows can reveal whether the connection is ready to become something more honest, more mature, and more real. There are moments when you suddenly think about someone without any obvious reason. A memory appears in your mind while you are doing something completely ordinary. You hear a familiar song and suddenly remember a conversation you had with them. You pass a certain place and an old feeling returns. You may wonder whether your intuition is trying to tell you something. The important thing is not to treat every coincidence as a guaranteed prediction. Instead, understand how deeply the unconscious mind can recognize emotional patterns before your conscious mind has fully understood them. Your mind is constantly observing details that you may not consciously notice. A change in someone's communication, a small shift in their behavior, an unfinished conversation, or even your own emotional reaction to their absence can all be stored beneath conscious awareness. You might not immediately understand why you feel different, but your inner world may already be processing information that your rational mind has not yet organized into a clear explanation. This is why intuition can sometimes feel like a quiet sense of knowing instead of a logical conclusion. It does not always arrive with a detailed explanation. Instead, it may appear as a feeling in your body, a repeated thought, a sudden memory, or an unexpected awareness that something inside you has shifted. When you have shared a powerful emotional connection with someone, your mind can become especially sensitive to patterns associated with that person. Their absence, their previous behavior, and the emotional history between you can create an internal map that continues operating even when they are not physically present. But there is an important difference between intuition and wishful thinking. When you deeply want someone to return, your imagination can easily become mixed with your perception. You may notice the things that support your hope while overlooking the things that challenge it. You may give special meaning to ordinary events because your heart is searching for reassurance. This does not make your feelings false. It simply means that strong emotions can influence the way you interpret what happens around you. That is why emotional awareness requires both an open heart and a grounded mind. You can acknowledge that something feels meaningful without immediately deciding what it must mean. You can respect your intuition without allowing it to replace reality. You can notice patterns while still waiting for clear evidence. Sometimes the most powerful sign is not a dream, coincidence, or sudden feeling. Sometimes it is a real action taken by another person. A message, a phone call, a sincere conversation, a change in behavior, a willingness to take responsibility, a consistent effort that continues after the first emotional moment has passed. If someone truly wants to move closer to you, their choices will eventually communicate what their words cannot. You will not have to spend every day decoding hidden meanings. You will not have to constantly ask yourself what they might be thinking. Healthy connection becomes clearer when both people are willing to communicate honestly. So if you have been sensing that something is changing, do not immediately run toward the conclusion that you have already imagined. Stay present. Let reality show you what is real. Give people space to reveal themselves through their choices. And most importantly, continue building a life that does not depend on whether someone returns to your door. Your worth does not increase because someone comes back. Your worth does not decrease because someone stays away. You are still valuable while you wait. You are still complete while you are uncertain. And if someone does return, they should meet a version of you that has grown, learned, and become more secure within yourself. Maybe that is the deeper meaning behind the knock at the door. It may not only be about the person standing outside, it may also be about the person you have become inside. The door can symbolize a choice. Will you open it from fear, desperation, and old attachment? Or will you open it from wisdom, calmness, and self-respect? You do not have to know the entire future before the moment arrives. You only need to be willing to meet the present honestly. If they come with sincerity, you can listen. If they come with confusion, you can ask questions. If they come with genuine change, you can decide what that means for you. And if they come without the accountability you need, you are still allowed to protect your peace. Sometimes what we call destiny is simply the meeting point between two people who have grown enough to make different choices. Sometimes the return of a person is meaningful because both people are finally capable of seeing the connection differently. Other times, someone's return teaches you that you no longer need what you once believed you could not live without. Either way, you do not lose by becoming more aware. You may have spent many nights wondering whether they still think about you. You may have replayed old conversations, questioned certain moments, and wondered why things unfolded the way they did. You may have asked yourself whether the silence meant rejection or whether something deeper was happening behind it. But the truth is that you do not need to solve every unanswered question tonight. Some answers become clear only when people finally speak and act honestly. Until then, protect your peace. Keep living, keep growing, keep becoming the person you were meant to become. And if one day you hear that unexpected knock, remember this. The person standing outside your door may be carrying a message, but you are not obligated to surrender your entire heart simply because they finally decided to speak. Listen, observe, breathe, let the truth reveal itself. Because the most important thing may not be what they say when the door opens. It may be what their presence, their actions, and their willingness to take responsibility reveal after the conversation begins. Sometimes one conversation can change everything, but sometimes the greatest change has already happened inside you long before anyone knocks. You may start seeing every coincidence as proof that this person is coming back. A dream may begin to feel like a prediction. A random song may suddenly seem connected to them, but this can become dangerous when your emotions begin depending on assumptions. Instead of asking, "Does this feeling prove that they are coming?" you can ask yourself, "What is this feeling showing me about my own emotional state?" Perhaps you are becoming aware that you still have feelings that were never fully resolved. Perhaps you sense that an old chapter is reaching a point where something needs to be acknowledged. Perhaps your inner world is preparing you to respond differently if this person actually appears. This change in perspective is powerful because it brings your attention back to where it truly belongs, within yourself. You cannot control another person's choice to return, communicate, or change, but you can become more aware of your own reactions. You can notice whether fear causes you to close yourself off or whether hope causes you to ignore reality. Awareness gives you the ability to face uncertainty without allowing uncertainty to control you. Sometimes intuition is not telling you exactly what will happen. It may simply be preparing you to pay attention. If this person eventually reaches out or arrives at your home, you will be able to look at the situation with greater clarity because you have already learned to separate your feelings from your assumptions. You will hear their words, observe their actions, and understand whether their presence reflects genuine emotional movement or simply a temporary wave of emotion. And perhaps that is the deeper meaning behind those sudden feelings, dreams, and memories. They do not necessarily promise that someone is physically moving toward your door. Instead, they may show you that something inside you is moving toward awareness. A feeling that once remained hidden is becoming easier to recognize. A question you avoided is asking to be answered. A connection you thought you had forgotten is reminding you that it still carries some meaning. When you become quiet enough to notice these inner signals without turning them into predictions, you begin to understand that intuition is not always about knowing the future. Sometimes it is about becoming conscious enough to recognize the truth when that truth finally stands in front of you. A person may believe that avoiding a difficult conversation will make uncomfortable feelings disappear. They may convince themselves that time will solve everything. They may believe that staying quiet is safer than revealing what is happening inside them, but unresolved emotions rarely disappear simply because they are ignored. They often remain beneath the surface, waiting for a moment when they can no longer be pushed aside. Your soulmate may have spent a long time trying to understand what they feel without allowing themselves to express it. Maybe they thought they could move forward by keeping themselves busy with work, responsibilities, other relationships, or ordinary daily routines. Yet there are emotions that cannot always be replaced by distraction. The more someone tries to suppress something meaningful, the more often it can return to their thoughts. This does not mean that every distant person will eventually return. Human relationships are complicated and people make different choices, but emotionally, the idea of someone returning because silence has become impossible represents a deeper kind of pressure. It represents the point where avoiding the truth no longer feels easier than facing it. Imagine carrying a sentence inside yourself for months or even years. Every time you think about saying it, fear tells you to stay quiet. You wonder what the other person will think. You imagine rejection, disappointment, embarrassment, or even anger, so you say nothing, but the sentence remains inside you. Eventually, the emotional pressure created by everything left unsaid can become stronger than the fear that originally prevented you from speaking. That is often how emotional courage begins. It does not always begin with a dramatic confession. Sometimes it is simply a person saying, "I need to tell you what has really been happening inside me." The person may not have every answer, they may still be confused about certain things, but they may finally be willing to stop pretending that nothing matters. If such a moment comes, your role is not to rescue them from their discomfort. You do not have to immediately make everything easier for them. Let them experience the responsibility of speaking honestly. Let them finish what they came to say. You can listen without immediately promising forgiveness, reconciliation, or a future together. Sometimes we become so focused on whether another person will return that we forget how much we have changed while they were away. The version of you who once waited anxiously may no longer exist. You may have learned to value your peace. You may have learned to recognize your worth. You may have stopped chasing explanations from someone who was unwilling to give them. And if they return, the meeting should not be about recreating the past exactly as it was. It should be about discovering whether something healthier can grow from what both of you have learned. Their return should be measured by sincerity, consistency, and willingness to communicate, not simply by the emotional excitement of seeing them again. Perhaps the most important thing they could bring to your home is not a dramatic declaration. Perhaps it is honesty. Maybe they are finally ready to acknowledge what they avoided. Maybe they are ready to explain what they could not explain before. Maybe they are ready to admit that their silence was never as simple as it appeared. When silence becomes impossible, words finally have the opportunity to carry what the heart has been unable to express. And sometimes the most powerful moment is simply the moment when two people stop hiding from the truth that has been waiting between them. You may have spent months trying to understand why someone behaved differently, why they became distant, why they seemed emotionally conflicted, or why the connection never developed in the way you imagined. You may have created your own explanations because no one ever gave you the complete story. Then one honest conversation can suddenly rearrange the entire picture. Your soulmate may arrive carrying information that helps you see their past behavior from another perspective. Perhaps they were dealing with fears they never expressed. Maybe they were struggling with a personal decision. Perhaps they were afraid of disappointing the people around them, or maybe they simply did not know what they truly wanted. Their silence may have looked like indifference, while internally they were experiencing confusion. This does not automatically excuse hurtful behavior. Understanding the reason behind an action does not erase the effect that action had on you. But understanding the reason can sometimes change how you emotionally process what happened. This is why you should pay close attention to the difference between an explanation and an excuse. An explanation provides context. An excuse avoids responsibility. If this person truly wants to repair the connection, they will not simply tell you why things happened. They will also acknowledge how their choices affected you. They will recognize the confusion they caused. They will understand the pain created by their distance. They will be willing to hear your side rather than making the entire conversation about their own feelings. The conversation may also reveal that both of you were experiencing the connection differently. You may have believed they had stopped caring, while they may have believed you no longer wanted them. You may have interpreted their silence as rejection, while they were interpreting your silence as a sign that they should stay away. Two people can care deeply and still misunderstand each other when fear prevents honest communication. Perhaps the most surprising revelation will be discovering how much each person was protecting themselves. One person withdraws because they fear being hurt. The other person sees the withdrawal and becomes afraid of reaching out. Both wait for the other to make the first move. Eventually, the distance begins to look like proof that the connection was never real. Yet beneath that distance may have been two people waiting for emotional safety. Still, do not allow a powerful conversation to erase your discernment. Hearing someone's truth can be deeply moving, but what happens afterward matters even more. If they say they have changed, watch how they behave. If they say they value the connection, notice whether their actions support those words. If they promise to communicate differently, observe whether they actually communicate differently when life becomes difficult again. The news they bring may change your understanding without necessarily determining your future. It may give you closure, it may create a new beginning, or it may simply give you a clearer picture of what actually happened. You may realize that the connection taught you something important about yourself, regardless of where the relationship ultimately goes. Sometimes we believe we need another person to return so that the story can finally make sense. But when truth arrives, we may discover that the deeper gift was understanding. You finally see why certain moments happened. You understand why certain choices were made. You recognize why the connection affected you so deeply. What once looked like a confusing chapter begins to reveal its emotional meaning. And with that understanding, you become more capable of moving forward without carrying the same confusion. When someone important finally comes toward you with something to say, it is natural to focus on their words. You may have imagined this moment many times. You may have wondered what they would confess, what explanation they would give, or what they might finally reveal about their feelings. But words are only one part of communication. Sometimes the deeper message is hidden in what a person does while they are speaking, what they are willing to face, and whether their behavior continues to match what they promise. A person can say, "I miss you," but those words become stronger when their actions demonstrate genuine effort. They can say, "I want to make things right," but those words become meaningful only when they accept responsibility for what happened. They can say, "I have changed," but real transformation is not proven through one emotional conversation. It is revealed through consistency over time. This is why you should listen carefully without allowing emotion to make every promise feel like certainty. Pay attention to how they approach you. Are they respectful of your feelings, or are they demanding an immediate response? Are they willing to give you time, or do they expect you to forget everything because they finally decided to speak? These details can reveal more than a dramatic declaration ever could. Sometimes a person's body language can also communicate what their words cannot. A long hesitation may show that the conversation is difficult for them. A willingness to maintain eye contact may suggest that they are prepared to face the truth. Nervousness may indicate vulnerability. However, these things should never be treated as absolute proof of someone's feelings. The important thing is to observe the entire situation instead of becoming attached to one particular signal. They should understand that you may need time to process what they are saying. They should not expect you to erase the past simply because they have finally decided to speak. Perhaps they will come with an apology. If so, listen not only to the words, "I am sorry," but also to whether they understand what they are apologizing for. A meaningful apology contains awareness. It recognizes the impact of behavior rather than simply expressing regret. It does not only say, "I feel bad," it shows an understanding of why the other person was hurt and what must change moving forward. And if they speak about the future, listen for something concrete. Promises about forever can sound beautiful, but real commitment often appears in simple decisions. Communicating honestly, showing up when they say they will, respecting boundaries, keeping promises, making consistent effort, taking responsibility when mistakes happen. Love becomes visible through repeated choices, not only through intense moments. This does not mean you should become suspicious of everything they say. Listen with compassion. Give them room to express themselves. Let them explain what they have been carrying, but keep your inner clarity. You can appreciate someone's vulnerability without surrendering your judgment. You can care about their feelings without abandoning your own needs. You can understand their fear without allowing that fear to control your future. The most important message may therefore be found in the space between what they say and what they do. Their words may open the door, but their actions will show whether they are truly prepared to walk through it. When you listen with both your heart and your awareness, you no longer need to chase hidden meanings or force certainty from one conversation. Time, consistency, and genuine effort will eventually reveal what words alone can never prove. Perhaps the most important message in this entire journey is that when someone meaningful comes toward you, do not listen only with your heart. Listen with awareness, and whatever they bring, remember that your worth does not depend on what they say or whether they stay. Trust your intuition, but remain grounded in reality. Give their words space, let them speak, then allow their actions to reveal their sincerity. You have grown through the silence, the uncertainty, and the waiting. You are not the same person you were before. You may have learned lessons that could only be learned through distance. You may have discovered parts of yourself that you never knew existed. You no longer need to chase what is meant to meet you with honesty. If this person truly belongs in your life, their presence should eventually bring clarity, peace, respect, and genuine love. It should not require you to abandon your standards or constantly question where you stand. And if they come to your door, remember that the real question may not be, why did they finally come back? The deeper question may be, what are they bringing with them now? Are they bringing the same patterns, or are they bringing real change? Are they bringing temporary emotion, or are they bringing consistent intention? Are they asking you to return to the past, or are they ready to build something different? You do not have to answer those questions in one moment. You are allowed to take your time. You are allowed to listen. You are allowed to think. You are allowed to protect your heart while still remaining open to what is possible. Sometimes the person we have been waiting for returns at exactly the moment when we no longer need them to return in order to feel complete. And that can be one of the greatest forms of emotional freedom. You can meet them from a place of choice instead of need. You can hear them without losing yourself. You can care without chasing. You can love without abandoning your own peace. So if something has been shifting inside you lately, pay attention to it, but do not force it into a prediction. Let it teach you something about yourself. Maybe your heart is not telling you that someone is coming. Maybe your heart is telling you that you are ready to face whatever comes next. Maybe the dream is not a promise. Maybe it is a reflection. Maybe the sudden memory is not a message from another person. Maybe it is a reminder of something within you that still deserves attention. And maybe the knock at the door, whenever or however it comes, will not be the beginning of your story. Maybe it will simply reveal how much you have already changed. When that moment arrives, if it arrives, you will not need to be the frightened person who waits desperately for an answer. You can be calm. You can listen. You can observe. You can decide. And you can remember that no matter what another person